its creative works, perpetuating a vital history of cultural dispossession. Read 21 copy, include parts of those mental carbon being writing or fixed in its works, not but in collective memory, culture and public domain appropriate with a very large amount of cultural material, help protection, bar culture, educate persons, common indigenous communities on their appropriation suspension, unauthorized use, followed various exemption, reproduction, non-commodity, private form appropriation, causing severe harm to dispossession. Appropriation of culture represents the ongoing dispossession of indigenous sovereignty and self-determination by the settler state. This commodification compounds psychological, political, and violent harms upon communities. Read 21. Culture remains sovereignty, copyright rules, protecting its creativity, investing autonomy, self-determination, actively dispossessing, and its culture excluded cultural illegal, probably made the unauthorized seeking informed conquest, legitimizing new settler state, the appropriation without free power and consent into as a continuation of settler colonialism, compound psychological, political harm, failure, risk, inflicting harm to generations, humiliation, violence, discrimination, diminished sovereignty, sacred memory, generate authority, cultural sovereignty, less than people, control production, possibility, sovereignty, people's big conversion, sovereignty, because other property is conquest. Fair use currently uses 3 factors to determine fair use, such as commercial exploitation and market value. The second factor on nature work is left out. Read 21. Newspapers should rely on copyright use permits on authority seeking when use permits of public interest are always holders' interest. Holders right prevent others from reproducing. Right is limited to courts focus on whether the work is transferred to commercial, not profit, address the value amount, useful attention to nature work itself. Cultural works plays a role determining appropriation. The work being copied, he says, incur for adjudicate justice. The appropriation for relations of production, inquiry to study form, and intellectual value, integral to nature inquiry. The second factor has been reduced to 2 distinctions: whether work was published and whether it was factual, which have no relevance. 321. Neither distinction to analyze second various factors, referring actually whether work is published, whether material is greater factual, whether material is greater reflection of the along the factors survived was the core 5 factor nature assessment. Its expressive nature was little consequence. Second factor increases reliance on other various factors below the form aspects of nature. Foreclose unauthorized uses. Courts reduce consideration to binary question whether appropriate work is greater or factual. Courts simply dismiss second factor. It is so vague that courts cannot apply it totally inadequate for adjudicating cultural appropriation. Read 21. As groups assert the rights of creativity, culture, current test will be little benefit to judges that decide complex cultural appropriations in religion and all the other district courts should identify nature church documents, reach opposite conclusions. Spiritual works are left in appropriation limbo. Judgment of complex Semitic carpets for ability to out that the current analysis can weigh specific forms of appropriation causes against public interest. Centering the second various factor views the work within its network of relations and rejects vague taxonomies that prevents unauthorized appropriation. Read 21. Second factor should protect authority. Examine creative environment to understand expectations, analyze unauthorized use, impact, what incentives, weights for use, the requirement of properties, consult communities, consultation will allow fair users and courts exposed to determine the work from his point of view, take precautions to ensure interests are protected, comply with his communities, court assess whether the unauthorized use will result motivation from nature's ontological examine context, etc. Privilege, European settler culture, ontological approach, different relations, group first oracle, indicate movement towards such an approach, observing how work is generated, functions, evaluation, be privilege or appropriation, allow to see how work is valued. Copyright is key, fairs must be amended to accommodate culture without falsely excluding indigenous products as incommensurable to legal frameworks. 321. Curve for use be a little benefits to judges. Works that are left in the limbo to proximity genres that are inherently factual. Second phrase factors been written out. Rehabilitate fair use and that comes to eloquent appropriation. Rehabilitate gives nature's meaning. Indigenous works who would think copyright for use of those who counter diversity. Copyright must evolve. Concerns for applicability are overblown and easily overcome. Flight so 3 originality, some value in this or rather faithful reproduction. Original means only the work is independently creative and possesses some creativity. Folklore sufficient to pass the threshold. Works left tangible fixation be benefits are impossible to set term design again. Copyright laws are flexible to course plus status. So indigenous artwork fixation is used by proof of authorship. The copyright was appropriate legal system. Harmonization of international recognition, Roxwell provide appropriate remedies against infringement, protection, and enforcement of the national boundaries and limiting confines, establishing ownership, decide who represents rights indigenous people, government, private entity, who responsible. Indigenous people want access to copyright, engaging in structures that have previously disadvantaged them allows protection and survival. For early 97, cultural symbols represent definable civilization, artists on mental cultural identity, those who have disturbed its meanings each time heritage is will. With this people, indigenous groups all legal redress, groups are turning willing to participate in what share appear from which they feel excluded from. They authorize certain uses, less than correct royalties, and want copyright to take back to their culture. Some use IP to prevent cultural harm or expropriation will cause imagery to lose its original significance would lead to a dissolution of culture. Control over cultural practices and IPs and necessity in the world of Western and extendings dominate and co-opt indigenous culture under the guise of globalization. Spin zero expansion, single foreign years, change, colonization, not end. Boundaries that shape understandings, collapsing Western understandings, and actually become dominant, increasing modification, culture, globalization, that means of opening up. Markets provides access to cultural practices, objects only to society, but also the feature of its societies. Oracle does not dump the out, but it dumps everything inside link. Breed 21, group Oracle because it goes not to be individual core found not merit factor created distinction. The core did not merit protection, the core fell back in the factor created distinction. Previously established, every act of appropriation is one step closer to the extinction of its heritage. Core 99, commercialization taken control in its culture, culture property law, has been the leading area to protecting its people. Commercialization in society, sign results. Examine its never before cultural heritage under real assault. Each time that happens, society with people. The most urgent is to preserve cultural knowledge, maintain their vitality. Thus, the plan of the United States government should strengthen its protection of copyright by using the second various factor to examine the context of work and exterior environment and the potential impact of unauthorized appropriation. Right. Excellent risk analysis is statistically impossible to justify genocide was going on low probability persecution until probabilistic analysis and crux also a mention computing method of studying calculating and we're trying something else, but something that we don't that can only happen once without any evidence to prevent it from happening. We do not know, we should not spend time to prevent something we don't know is possible, leading towards skepticism. D, reducing risk by 1 billion to 1 billion to 1 percentage point with is worth 100 billion more lives than genocide of 1 billion people. Implied utilitarian capitalist structures limits of any no means of deciding how we should act. Vast numbers gives the idea that some extinction is worth more than any other justice. Small sample sizes, biases, unreliability means that one should not read too much on expert surveys. Problems that when it's treated as times league policy. The field's moderacy because they're both funding for tech owners. The compete with disciplines about extra crushing oppression, extra risk analysis, not risk analysis, found a possible data point. It offers for Mr. Rhetoric probability rather rigorous calculations to evaluate humans quantitatively incapable of extracurricular from eugenics. The numerical probabilities is probability with to make an assumption. A possibility utilitarianism justifies exploitation. For indigenous communities, for Western gay rejected Smith 87 gentle consequences, precede constitution destroy. Indigenous people so push towards extinction, utilitarian genocide become prominent. The Americas become proud pronounced. Indigenous people subject to genocide attack in the name of development. Some persons preside. So the others can live tends to be total. Extinction is an empty superlative. Forgo improbable impact and retrench humanity to Western frames and manifest colonial genocide. Mitchell 17. Extinction become an empty superlative for gesture to act for abstract for unthinkability. Exposure contributing to formation of Western subject to extinction, fantasy negation, expressive desires. Extinction is not a metaphor. Right down discourses address dissemination, destruction, activism, and systematic ability, and perpetuate violence disproportionately affect groups inflicted great rates for aggressors as the colonial genocide, treating extinction as something short. Recharting zero such understandings of person which is an act of violence, obscure time with the race-lusting structures. Prioritize structural violence as prerequisite to addressing other modes of destruction. Mental 17. Structural violence involves discrimination, colonialism, complex of violence, each form is each significant cause extinction, scientific change, driving extinction, dissolution within its governance, destruction, knowledge through appropriation, colonial genocide, body all, destruction by killing all indigenous communities and erasing knowledge responses, leave violence attack, command to the power, focus on extreme calamity, obscures dismiss of logics, the precipitate extinction events, 21, extreme calamity, ignores violence on people which acts and traditions that take humans intentionally commit such acts, indicates nothing, prevents utterly destroying each other, genocide, precipitate actions, and threats, perpetuate them, seek remaking the human condition, Saudis downplay genocide, indigenous suffering, current moments, is not present, relies on distancing from past violence, indigenous people see themselves as navigating one-handed crisis, the technology is also stable and run resources from communities treated as expendable. What is there is hard to prioritize, more urgent given calamities. Go back to the advantage IPs repurposed towards indigenous knowledge protections. Anything else denies indigenous people a valuable legal tool against corporation, corporate afford these people. Rights, ownership, specific properties through the IP laws of Western consecration and ownership of those laws are the primary vehicle for prevention for works to segregate indigenous interests from this regime in line with globalization and commodification. This is not a powerful legal shield and sword. Essential that laws are not discarded but rather adapted to accommodate these situations. Inclusion of cultural knowledge that works within an influential poverty regime requires some rewiring but does not diminish. Guide the machine itself, copyright laws and their from relation or not corporate laws must be extended to protect cultures. Only the after yards are used while heeding the demands of marginalized groups. 321. Appropriation combat of settler bonds while eroding sovereignty. Corporate law provides protection services, gatekeeping mechanism for protection, and appropriation from considering appropriations. A decolonized fair doctrine serves cultural protection in all natures. Reorienting interpretation fair factor test. A decolonized for the second fair factor would assess the worst function value and other marginalized groups contemplate copyright infringement claims. Fair use undoubtedly keys a key role in success.
Okay, good for cause.
Yeah.
Okay. What evidence does the plan stops appropriation? The plan offers protection to indigenous cultural works, but what evidence says that people would stop appropriating post-plan?
Well, the point is like people would appropriate, but then it would go to fair use, and then the courts would determine that.
Why is that enough of a deterrent?
Because they just can't do it under the law.
They can't do it under the law.
Yeah, they can't steal it under the guise.
Wait, what consequences are there? Like, do they get arrested?
Injunctions, damages.
Injunctions, damages. Why wouldn't they just like pay through those?
You can't pay through an injunction.
Okay, sure. Framing. Why? How do we determine what is or isn't low probability?
Broadly, we've made a critique about extinction rhetoric, which we think is in and of itself.
How do you know that extinction is inherently unlikely?
Well,
every extinction scenario?
One, because the internal links to get into extinction are so lengthy, and the amount of intervening actors at each step make it almost like 0.001%. Second, it's improbable because you're predicting an event that has never happened before. And suddenly, like,
an event that has never happened before. Why is that inherently impossible to predict? Like, your evidence literally says it's statistically impossible.
Yeah, it's impossible because there is literally no way to calculate extinction and like the planetary extinction of everyone on this Earth, like from one event.
Your Mitchell card talks about climate change as a genocide. Should we talk about climate change?
Well, the argument is not like extinction, like.
No, your card is about climate change. Like, it also talks about extinction probably, but it is like the process of climate change is existential and a genocide to native communities.
Yeah, sure. The argument is like climate change is bad, but why do we only care about climate change when white people are affected?
Wait, who
Like,
said
that's the
what?
first
Who said
argument.
that?
But
Who's-
second, it's like we don't think
no, I
solving
literally
climate change
just
is
told you that your
exclusively-
card says it's a genocide against Native people.
Yeah.
Why do you assume I am only concerned about like the well-being of white people in the context of climate change?
Not necessarily. Our argument
But
is like
that's what you said.
climate change rhetoric, as distinct from how indigenous people have been facing it, is wrong. Indigenous people have been facing climate change for so long now. They're facing the effects, disproportionately effects of it, and we
So,
really don't care about
It
it.
sounds like it should be prioritized then.
Not
Do we
above structural
deprioritize
violence.
extinction in all circumstances?
Sorry?
Do we deprioritize extinction in all circumstances, like relative to indigenous violence? Or
Yeah.
violence against
At the,
indigenous
like,
communities?
Yeah, we think so. At the least level, they should be evaluated the
Okay.
same way.
Why is preventing existential risks utilitarian genocide?
Yeah, the Shuster and Woods evidence is like, when we prioritize extinction, it allows us to ignore structural violence in the status quo in favor of
Wait, why is that
better
genocide?
future
Like your card is literally
No.
util has been used to justify genocide. I don't think the
Okay,
180
sure,
has read
that's-
evidence about a literal genocide that is going on against indigenous communities. It is about cultural appropriation.
Okay, sure. For example, the war on terror, we allowed ourselves to bomb a bunch of countries in the idea that like white
Why does
humanity
that
was
mean
going to save from
utilitarianism
nuclear
is
weapons,
innately
and it
evil?
allows us to cause a bunch of structural violence. But second, the rhetoric itself is like eugenics, because you're like, we should not affect structural violence now in favor of some future humanity.
Right, it's that. 6 off, then appropriation, then framing.
Sorry. I haven't gotten it.
Okay, it's on the speech draft.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want me to put on the email?
No,
chain?
no, 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 I just forgot. I'm good.
Everyone, I'll see.
One second. Okay,
You good now?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. The United States federal government should find that copyright protections cannot cover traditional knowledge, establish three genres protection for traditional knowledge and indigenous culture heritage, including the second fair use factor, including using the second fair use factor to examine the ontological nature of work and potential impact of unauthorized appropriation on its creative environment, solves both defensive and positive protection. OM 17, the three genres routine with a combination of traditional knowledge and ensure that custodians are able to manage it. Genres offer rights for positive protection and TK empower communities to work on knowledge, holding use and benefit from work tradition and benefit from work taken into account transboundary nature of TK, which is widely shared across nations. The counterpoint spills over to protecting blockchain using sui generis database rights. RE24, ideal regime for protection of blockchain, creating trust over ledger blockchain-based database satisfied test for sui generis rights. Sui generis safeguard for the safe bet for blockchain only requires investment obtaining common advantages of database rights. Regime carved out a special category blockchain to be enabled inventions, never impractical advantages to sui generis. First file system rights, head start does not necessarily result in patent peak grand design. If it's how after regime is protecting invention, proving efficient, until a more holistic and functional analysis and more straightforward the existing database rights provides a more extendable form of protection. Offensive blockchain innovation secures sustainable development extinction. G22 sustainable development is crucial to securing the future for humanity. Blockchain digital change exhibit a great potential for sustainable practices. Blockchain a positive impact analysis in 17 SG sustainability essential concept economic environmental social dimensions. Blockchain is decentralized information tech distortion action establish trust decentralization better info traceability data transparency security drive social change finance strategic supply chain logistics energy manufacturing and industry healthcare maritime transport food ag. Next off is ASPEC not specifying the branch of government that does the plans voting issue makes fair and private impossible and incentivizes vagueness to search generics on the biased topic voter for clash and fairness. Next off the executive counterfund. The United States executive should interpreting existing laws shaping its protection of copyright by using second fair use factors examine the context of work in this creative environment and the potential impact of unauthorized appropriation. The United States judiciary should unanimously endorse that interpretation. The counterfund provides Chevron deference, making the executive the ultimate interpretive IP law, but that requires a vague delegation. Walker 16. Supreme Court willing to raise Chevron deference means weakening the federal circuit by declaring the HT the authoritative interpreter of law, which is what Chevron deference until Supreme Court would be shifting power away. Reviving Chevron is the only solution to climate change extinction. Green 24. The reaction on climate change, some executives use broad powers to issue defers legislative action not sufficient change will be further the courts discoursing on more conservative bend a shift away from deference, and but by the government there can be no legislative reaction, move away from sovereignty matters away from the exact solution is exact flex and lendo extensive that the climate change Supreme Court says subject of lower courts for battles over climate change will have concern about mistakes technically acute as a reach tries the solution for climate policy is administrative law. Next off the CAP IPR's definition of modern capitalism will lead to information of oppressed working class monopolizing innovation. Right 14. Information tool of oppression means amassing ownership of ideas, private property, those who work hard, exploited, alienated, exploitation of intellectual labor made possible by IP. Workers will increase productive capacities, owners they become alienated from the products of their own labor. Productive activity becomes something alien to the worker. American capitalism is a root cause of militarism, conflict, and environmental destruction, guarantees extinction. Hannibal, in Durban 23, existential that is growing faster is not simply because of climate, but there was a nuclear war. U.S. capitalism feels climate change and militarism, elevating profit over all other units, commitment to unfettered growth, extending markets internationally, public industry, and inextricable from capitalism. U.S. interest settling off oil, manufacturing, and fueling. U.S. interest in more capitalist economy to crucial structural extinction forces. The alternative, the class change movement towards socialism, foster 19, socialism, long-term failure to economic ends, monopoly, and financialization, undermining global society and ecology. Class change movement towards socialism, open up qualitative new developments, socialist tech long-term planning, equality, solidarity, sustainability, the future allow for new collective forms of development. New hierarchical measures could be taken to democratic control of the satisfaction of basic needs inherent to vision and humanity counter to capitalism. Next off the politics is that Johnson forces the debt limit increase through reconciliation. Now, but any distractions derail the deal. Warsaw 1-2, debt ceiling, identify Republicans make their move message. Trump wants to avoid distraction. Debt ceiling becoming intertwined with other issues. For agenda, Johnson required to offer attention to Troy, holding everything in sway. Yelling made extraordinary moments. January 14th, strengthen the IP flies in the face of new political consensus. SL 23, policymakers arguing for weakening stronger IP. Many come under the influence of proselytizers who see IP as a tool for corporate enrichment. Weak IP as a tool in equity and redistribution. Absent deal debt default and pitches. All has rule of 23. Dollar dominates the greater the theater for great power struggle plays in the future of LEO and developed transactions. Pressing investments. All currencies were pegged to the dollar. China's markets nowhere near size of sophistication. Yuan accounts for less than 3%. Dollar 6%. Dollar enjoys extraordinary lead. Not invisible for domestic policies. Stage confidence of favorable with large deficits. Rising public debt. Spectre of U.S. default is voluntary due to debt ceiling. Core logic. Economic relations. Line with security. Dollars tend to benefit. War. Domestic crisis and climate catastrophes. Extinction. Job for 20. Dollars role as a driver of U.S. leadership. Worth keeping dollars role comparison to military adventures. And dollars will offer the alternative to military action. Stability with around the limit of the weapons and adversaries by new venture borrowing climate mitigation. Next up, the federalism path ban. The 50 states from office and national actions, including national government associations, suspend their cooperation in the administration of federal governments until the United States federal government strengthens its protection of copyright by using the second fair use factor to examine the context of organized creative environment and the potential impact of unauthorized appropriation that completes and solves and results in federal adoption that expands dual sovereignty. Boomer 21. The state and federal dual sovereign rivals federalism recognizes independence and power to protect states not administer a program by actively seeks to change its own co-op, succeed in changing law, export gap and regulatory decadence policy states. Refuse the program instructed this. Federal federalizing states resistant in conjunction with state policies. The Fed become far more cooperative. The Fed is authority and degree to comply. Resurgent state sovereignty, self-extinction, Mahaukas 19. We face economic and security challenges, proliferate ISIS, terror, the war. These are symptoms of a greater problem that risk failure to enter the use. This is our own failing governance to transfer away from the state or so much power to defend enemies, targeted special interests in lobbying, negotiation, possibly created unbalanced system unless we justice and we failure to fix our actions with navigate solutions to societal challenges, disaster cause, return power to the states, otherwise dysfunction will only get worse. The appropriation advantage. Plan flaws. One is he only uses fair use to examine. There's no redress for anything bad happening. Copyright can't solve. Rule 22. Most oral traditions not be originally the cross-generational nature, but it would mean non-citizens parties can enjoy copyright without very little input from themselves. There's a risk of parties assuming oral tradition or in the public domain can be used by anyone when documentation made by outsiders in the community that become authors of oral traditions. Therefore, representation of tradition will be protected by copyright, but it will only benefit the control of outsiders of the community. Further, equals it just copyright is not going to be sufficient to stop collection by the outsiders of the community or to control the institution. Copyright is more likely to be used against the community. All causes to the appetite for use. A. Duration. Farley 1 Farley 97. Copyright law initially appears to be vested in the doctrine, however, runs from the various first elements from protection problem with identifying particular author more significant than determines insufficient protection is for the benefit of community whose existence not limited in time, even assuming 100 years of period is still insignificant. In the life of tradition, they pay thousands of years, and it's just people not want to release or take protect limited term. Means full co-workers already be in public domain, not for an outside from copying online. 10 will be originality requirements. Following 97 originality requirement, copyright law required. The work must not be copied with a product of original thought, skill, labor requirement. May prevent problems for folklore workers. Ancient evolved generations ago represent the continuation of time honored myths and legends. Folklore directly derived from pre-existing works involved slowly fit reproduction is prized and designs must be faithfully and accurately the main means of passing down religion, culture, artistic license, capitalism. C. Fixation requirements. Farley 97. Indigenous authors argue fixation requirements is a very potential integral medium art endeavor. B. Fixed folklore is the antithesis of recorded culture, often may be not cited for 6 indigenous word teachers, however, not the authors. D. Group rights. Farley 97. Group rights. Property of the group reclaimed for the original law, not considered that privileged relationship with the words art is understood to be in a petition to increase responsibility. But one participant in the conflict group after most harvest is actually executed by group rights and property incompatible with indigenous indigenous custom and tradition giving rise to one individual. The indigenous community can allowing one individual criminal use of the Star Day for Jesus on the cross. E deterrence from Father 97. The threat of reduction and destruction of infringing will not be enough to deter individuals and competition using indigenous art without authorization. C threatening with threatening is powerful only after damage or rewarding for economic harm. Helping infringe indigenous art would never be economical use. It may not be also prove infringing cause any economic loss. Now framing future imaginary and extinction are valuable. Stevens 18 recognition of future along with revelation of any future receiving becoming some precedent and responsibilities to ever to which awareness of survival issues ever take link with the action effect and human responsibility of scholars to engage in survival issues if the worst is possible futurism is necessary for human survival promise the future is not a simple liberal reasonable ways marginalizing the issue of social worth and HD possibility of HD product of temporality beneath the their cause is in the cave catastrophic scenarios it's an indirect specific insight to Bostrom the woods evidence
Skip to this.
Aeronag accidental rates are ignored. Chris 19. Psychology causes us to ignore rates of availabilities. Influence or what feels most visible. Accidental rates of no availability. So, and relieving this stat cells otherwise affect. Make decision on how we feel rather than through reason. Human beings are terrible. Devaluing the accidental rates privilege memories of word. No one should feel more empathy for one than a group of people, even though we should care about multiple people. Devices and become affected. Colarities, numbing, and inability to feel for luxury of empathy arose as death filled roads went on to the future life. We have an ethical responsibility to stop extinction. Metropolis 17 human beings. Strategy safeguard beings end of themselves. Fraction implies obligation of external responsibility. Responsibility must have function making possible more everyday responsibility, always the preservation of future responsibility, responsible action, politics itself, politics itself. I'll send the NDA text.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, status,
Condo.
and then net benefits.
Let's see. Sui generis is internal and copyright bad.
So sui generis is case and internal.
Yeah.
Okay.
The executive is
Oh, well, and the politics was said.
yes, and
It
politics.
doesn't do IP.
Executive is internal.
The sui generis counterplan text says that including using the second theories factor to do the plan. Why does that not strengthen IP?
Because it repurposes the second fair use factor into a new sui generis regime.
Okay, so what's different between the sui generis regime and status quo?
The difference between the sui generis regime and the status quo is that it's evaluated like completely differently. Rather than being a part of intellectual property law, it's simply a part of property law, which are two distinct parts of
What
case
are
law.
the distinct protections?
No. It's a question of the body of law. Like, our coach goes to law school and was explaining this to us before the round. Like, there are different bodies of law that might overlap. For example, like civil law and criminal law. This is another example of that. So there's IP law, which is the body of law that the AF is couched in. The sui generis counterplan would then be couched under a separate body of law that
okay.
is,
I
like
wanna
Evan said, under
yeah.
property law and not IP specifically.
I want to talk about something he said earlier. He said that in the new sui generis regime, the second factor would be a part of it. What part of the counterplan text says that?
What?
He said that the second factor would
Including
be
using the second fair use factor to examine
How
on-philosophy.
does that, like, what part of the counterplan text means that's part of the sui generis regime?
What? It says
Including
establish
using
sui
the second fair
generis
use factor.
protection, including using the second fair use
Yeah.
factor.
Yes, again, like, why does that mean the second factor is now part of the sui generis regime?
Because we fiat it.
We
I'm
fiat
You
said-
don't.
confused.
That's not what your counterplan
Yes.
text
Yeah.
is.
Inclu-
How?
establish
How?
sui generis protection, including using the second fair use factor to examine,
Yeah.
et cetera, et
Again,
cetera.
how does
What
that
are you-
fiat that the second factor
It's
is
the
now part of
syntax
What
of
do you
it's the syntax of how we set up this counterplan text. We said we do sui generis, comma, including this. Obviously that inclusion is couched under the previous clause,
Why
i.e.
is
sui
it-
generis.
Why?
Because that's how grammar works, man.
No,
Like,
like that, you don't fiat it.
I don't think anyone's on board
The-
with this besides you, Gavin.
The
Like,
alt, is it fiated
maybe.
for the cap K, yes.
internationally?
Yeah.
Is it floating point?
No.
Okay. You said the NGA text. Okay. I want to talk about the Chevron counterplan. How can the executive strengthen IP? Like, isn't it just like unconstitutional?
Exactly, we fiat past that.
How?
By having the executive do it and then the court unanimously upholds it, which also reverses the
How does that fiat pass what I just said?
Once it, we explicitly fiat past it.
Okay,
The court
actually,
unanimously upholds.
Another question about it.
the executive
Why
doing it.
doesn't the overturning of Chevron thump the net benefit?
What?
No, the overturning of Chevron gives us uniqueness. We said overturning Chevron is bad, and we should like re-overturn.
So why did that destroy preparedness for climate change?
Because it was fairly recent.
Yeah.
Also, climate change is not like a linear thing. Like, oh, we don't have X policy to protect it. It's a question of tipping points and maximizing the amount of action. Okay.
Actually,
Actually, we're gonna take a second back. Okay, oh, perfect. That was 3 seconds.
So 9:57.
appropriation, framing, basic, capture, sui generis, executive counseling, MGA counseling, that's it. Okay, anyone else? Cultural appropriation combines psychological, social, and political harm to one indigenous community, perpetuating a violent history of settler dispossession that diminishes tribal agency and sovereignty while your urgent transfer legal rights. 1C1 wrong. The second factor is that we mandated at fair use is binding analysis. 1C2 doesn't assume indigenous people who get copyright in the status quo, but its uniqueness for the absence, but the assumption of a work to be in the public domain, the absolve, because it ensures indigenous people can file for and win a fair use case determining someone has infringed on the work. It acts as the all causes group. The first, despite this, many works are still under copyright, stopping even one instance of appropriation is necessary. The 3 and correct. Second, we solve ontological natures of broad KT mechanism for evaluating other aspects. That's 3. The duration argument Fuentes says the longevity of copyright means that it can artificially expand the duration. Second, originality. Folklore is original. It's a process of creative development. The fixed argument, lack of fixation helps extend copyright terms and indigenous works qualify. That's a Fuentes evidence. The group rights non-unique and can be relegated to different entities. That's Fuentes. The injunctions Farley says examining economic harms proves infringement, which is an effect on creative environment. And the 4th factor, but they saw man and all 20 and undermined properties of relation to hold on when licensing adopting one victim because the cause of molesting out when causing the litigation injunction to not impose the sub deal on other part of the injunction on the tablet working outrage for the instead of litigating activity as long as the court injunction can list suspended the arrest and increase likelihood of infringement. Framing. Extinction doesn't outweigh first impossible any approach to probability when the magnitude is insanely high makes decision making impossible. Second is eugenics, a calculation where the greatest number always sacrifices indigenous minority groups. That's just in the word. Third is conjunctive fallacy. 2 events is less likely than 1 and anything else results in worse forms of terror planning of advocacy. 4 research creates a risk of the one will only read extinction impacts. 1 futurism is wrong. They're not futuristic. It's a promise of survival rather than affirmation of the status quo. 1 yes, it's about Bostrom, but also broad existential studies and probability studies that paper over structural violence. They need to state reasons for why it's not just cite the contents of the article. 1 first, it's wrong. Corporate funding for extinction risk always trumps studies of repression and debate impacts disprove. Second, a perception huge numbers. It is set to perverse imagination to inflate possibility and use to justify violence. That's Chester Woods and Mitchell. 1 doesn't assume combination with probability analysis by presuming extinction as true. Structural violence found the conditions for existential risk and is papered over by existential studies. That's Shelter and Wood. A-spec. We meet where the USFG further specification lacks a resolution basis which is unpredictable and arbitrary and leads to agent counterplots and decentral research. Worst case, default to reasonability and race to the bottom. Capcake. Framework only evaluate plan desirability that entails weighing the case of having links to the plan's founded implications for unpredictable critiques estimate fairness class. The framing issue for the links is that you're non-unique or never. IB exists in the status quo and there are other capitalist institutions. Either Yale overcomes the links or cancel. Kaplinsky 20 irrelevant that falls my developed capitalism. Market 20,000 year to include any number of secret structures result in tyranny. There are never success revolution ever. A working class that ever one all classes have been reformist capitalism never harder than the revolution. Employees will get reformed democracy never be in the wish of social government. Unintentional to hard to imagine so with a criminal transformation. Oh, well, they cancel the under 7 because it obviously doesn't do the plan. But if they fiat it, that's a voter, private actor, international fiat, destroy debate. There are billions of possible actors. Justifies object fiat and obliterates so it's fairness and clash link turn. Second factor controlling analysis of the other 3 moves factors like market value, limiting capitalist analysis. Musumi when Snicky 17 when induced was kind of become like research diverse technology different affirming that so okay, unless the IP where cultural difference on monetary partial and capitalist and informative well research cultural preservation IP which are our policy delivery so we're to do capitalist hard physical and moralistic over there. Grabbing outside of division outside of capitalism not meaning or simply anarchist spontaneity to measure into the quality economic qualification capitalism not to do diversity accelerationist theory capitalist sweet do the counterplan Ginsburg 21 20 discussion of second phase factor code is but within the core of the running lineage of the copy set up by other works and response to transfers and also because of reason bottom of the pressure many parts of the address the holding of fair and fair use is copyright craft 24 coordinated is the most popular defense against copyright. Number 10, A proceeds an undetermined particular from. 15, when you sit in an argument because a particular course of appeal, recognizes the perm to both fails versus relegation absent. 19, all rights associated with past and future serious sweet gender, sweet enemies, other forms of product do not and find the common core. Right style interprets like sweet gender, restricted the court, explains sweet gender, nature of writing such as its actual limitation will lie. As they are the court offered a limited time, like interpreting courses to mean limitation periods, while remedies not permission what is up. This sweet gender will convene at the same time you said after people's head holding a claim only breach of duty counsel for the wrong committed the late and barred limitation periods sweet gender is simply present on right to reconciliation. Second is heating demands. That was case text law. The counterplan does the same thing as the app, which makes it unique but had no provision to do so legal. Process will fail. Actually already did that. Now per other issues, counterplans must be effectively and functionally competitive, maximizes germane comparison, background, and objectivity. Blockchain failed, inflexible and overprotective. That text innovation. Morando, no nice user protection, general copyright, technical, completely cutting edge, ad hoc protection, collecting, conflict protection, innovation, ad hoc protection, even though they're like the sustainable, considered on the logic, single person solver. Permanent hybrid institute violent the premise of copyright representation innovative and partial free writing and market fill executive counterplan per and other issues solved and legitimate results in identifying and interpreting existing law and beyond judicial support agent double bind the copyright is how the legislative branch functions as an executive agency. Either A, the counterplan is functionally impossible, B, the copyright office functional overlap justifies the proposal. 18, the office that has the LLC as a structural matter within legislative branch function considering the proposals and so acts as the executive. Obviously unconstitutional counterplans are a voter because they make it impossible for us to have an make agent counterplans impossible to be, and also conduct fairness and research in class because they can just be on about unconstitutional process. Both permitted the counterplan for others who know that. A, Walker's only in the context of the PTO, not the copyright act. B, Chevron deference when applied to copyright. Counterplan doesn't solve problem. All 24 general review with copyright, not all does have copyright acts and legislative make it up with the ABA copyright. This is drawn from the round received ever to copyright of the bill. No internal like Walker is written in the context that you actually if Chevron could be applied, there's no reverse causal evidence. That's the core action from the server. Obviously no impact to warming, no international fall or legislation that solves in time for tipping points. The NGA counterplan. Perm do both. It's all by invoking the threat while still doing the perm. Do the plan over other issues. 50 state counterplans are voted in short background and research by shifting discussion from the action to the act. Fed will withdraw support. Garner 19 federal government penalties challenge. Perm to the counterplan. The sub-federal act, even a local government can trouble the sub-federal withdrawal of support of federal initiative while one step in spite of the resident and strike down agreement. 15 is taking refusability to against what would have played would bring the super order of fair. Artificially competitive counterplans are also a voter kill rate or attribution over opportunity cost while subsuming the full end result of the plan, making leveraging app often impossible. The net benefit no spillover. The counterplan doesn't normalize uncooperative federalism or broadly to one-off event no spillover. Go on 22 purpose to discuss spillover, but federalism also direct source of leaders may hold after all increase in number of beta for policy. Acceptable bias and looking more credible influence politics. And the only line that mentions it's all about critique all causing that it takes 30 years to solve. That's delay. 1 to McCullough 19 to actually call the fight with legislative resort the proper tracking. The imbalance with the branches returning power back to the stage when you see results within 30 years and medals from bills. Capital 20 research are going to contend with the effort to overtake scandal time to overlook the run season like to ban. Birth control CDs moves and moves with the right foot doing gender so too. When President Roberts for law and sees to activate women coming with refusal at the point to federals in the United States is going to work with the legitimacy of court decision and Condo is a voter intent clash in research causes strategic skill that causes argument and irresponsibilities and dispo checks because they can make arguments when we can't have multiple plans. That's great. GOP makes it impossible. Solar 1219. Journalism of both human rights and death seems strong as a version of the human rights. Bolton 2230. Represents not receiving the death ceiling and Thune won't do it. Bolton 1219. Thune is not ready to drop on the board. So that eliminates something that markets pay attention. I'm not sure why they look at or the reconciliation process makes it inevitable and zero sum like Libby. 1227. The Republicans are looking to use reconciliation project only needs simple majority of votes in the Senate. Republicans use negotiation with the Democrats and countless numbers and fighting. It's a status quo bagging 24. GOP parties have overcome internal anticipation for the spending to gas oil and gas master to even more positive. Not easy. Republicans have a majority. If the lawmaker has approached to the female to really even must pass legislation. If it's also scam priorities to go ahead and Trump will abolish it, solve the dissent coin. 24, the death ceiling, completely evident by the House Republicans legislative initiative. Number 1 should be thrown out entirely the president elect. The law should submit that the paper over the pressure on whoever's president and Republicans. Law of the time, continue to make Congress for the government second part of the right executive instruction court. To vote to significant discussion how is work to use to exploit Congress instruction something may be relevant. No reason for the second factor limited to New York because for the presidential lottery and coding honor addition information legislative provides support for the expanded and nuanced second factor inquiry. The courts are insulated from backlash. 17, the branches can ever stand against political majorities. Provides knowledge and knowledge not decreasing and never be a solitary force of other character. The president appoints one at a time. The court committee who not just one member participant is mandatory. And Buffalo returns boarding school reform and indigenous food. 8 group native rights are bipartisan and default won't happen. Kroger 23 big drama. It will be the debt ceiling and will the U.S. default go China own and create new global financial system. U.S. default is a problem. And 20 often prevent a deal. County churches ignore the debt ceiling altogether. Foreign investors do not believe China cover bond market deal any of these in one side are reluctant to put reverse in Chinese market because where the funds will be not really U.S. Chinese market are indispensable to other countries to ever prevent integrity. Ever annex to the perspective leaders on no alternative reckless policy. What's the outcome? A market increase of the world has never forced away, and the dollar is stable. Recommend 20 important parts of reality. Check emphasis to outline what currency uses the more for the global middle class. And almost start cover the dollar's role as a safe interrelated currency, which not China other country currency that demands and respected. We'll search the U.S. is hindered by the fact alternatively so with the competitors different into new euro crisis. China use currency to other alternatives. Gold, Bitcoin have major drawbacks. Go back to the executive counterplan. Overtrain Chevron fails cycle. Berg 24. The court opened the door for the climate exceeding related to the water and environmental to offer agency for reconciliation agency believe. Elegant to clean water back to pollution. China how to implement things to reflect clean water. Best approach agency introverted means that they were making agency under right wing of what he stopped and burned down. But also feel in charge of clear every visionary movement. original regulatory responsibility being hard to control pollution tags of agency decisions. Agency decisions.
Okay. Good for Kyle. Reason to reject the team.
Alternative fiat on the K, condo, artificially competitive counterplans, 50 state counterplans, and unconstitutional fiat.
What's in?
What was the last? Sorry, which card did you read on Chevron? The last one. What was the off one?
The one under climate, Seagull, and Burke.
Forgot.
What's an artificially competitive counterplan?
The definition that we read, like, it subsumes the full end result of the plan and competes off of things like.
What does the full end result of the plan mean?
For
Seems
example,
like
the
counterplans
counterplan
have to do
results in the
something.
full plan.
Okay, so
That
like,
feels pretty clear since the executive counterplan results in the full plan, the uncooperative federalism results in the full plan.
okay, like what does it mean?
It
to
doesn't
result
have,
in the
yeah,
full
it
plan?
doesn't have a germane net benefit to the app. There's not a disadd to the app, there's a disadd to us not doing the process,
Okay, so
which is not
so
germane to
essentially
the
it's just counterplans need a germane net benefit.
app. We should think about it as like the process kind of like bad.
Okay, the agency double bind, could you explain this argument?
On the
Exactly.
let me- Oh, yeah, the Copyright Office is housed in the legislative branch, which is the Personalski evidence, but functions as an executive agency. So either perm to the counterplan works, or like, it's impossible.
I don't understand why this means perm to the counterplan works. It just says it functions like an executive agency, but doesn't say that it is an executive agency.
I mean, sure, then it doesn't work because it is like Copyright Office. Copyright is in Title 17 of the U.S. Code. It's not something the executive can just do.
Okay, so that seems to concede do the counterplan then, if it's like in the US code and not something the executive can do with, right?
Well, that's a strike down argument. Either that
Okay,
or
so
the pronouncement.
so we're
evidence
resolving
is
the
like,
double bind by saying it's impossible.
What? No, the Copyright Office is like not a distinct executive or legislative instrument. It
It
is
says it's
in
housed
the
within the Library of Congress.
yeah,
That
it
seems
is
pretty
in the Library of
distinct to me.
Congress, but the function of it is more consistent with that of an executive agency.
I don't see how that matters. Like different agencies within different branches may function like an agency in another branch, but that doesn't mean that
Well,
they're
I
housed
guess
in
we
the
can
branch.
agree to disagree. Like, we think that that means that the executive, like the Copyright Office, functions as
Okay.
an
Could
executive.
you explain the first perm on the exact counterplan?
The first term,
Yeah. Does it include all the words of the plan?
sure, plan plus this term. Yes.
Okay, and then you just like insert like pieces of the
Well,
counterplan.
actually, yeah, this does include all of the plan. It just adds the parts of the counterplan.
Okay, I don't. This seems to be like essentially exactly the counterplan text, right? I don't see how this is not just perm to the counterplan.
Sure, we think it's perm other issues.
What other issue? It's doing it over the app. There's no
Well,
other
I guess
issue.
like the other issues we sent were like the environment, broad copyright.
Okay.
957.
Yeah.
Sorry.
stop prep. 707 taken, so 253 remaining. I'm sending it. Okay, it's sent. It's the executive counterplan, then NGA, then framing.
Oh, it's on speech.
Yes.
Uh,
And this.
I am good.
It's executive, DA friend.
NGA and then framing, yes.
Yeah, Jimmy, you got it. I heard it's fine.
Is everyone good?
Wait, 1 second.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah.
The counterplan solves. It has the executive interpret ambiguities in existing law, giving it the power to do the plan, which gives it the same legal weight. That's key to revive Chevron deference. Unanimous judicial support for the interpretation overturns the Loper Bright case, giving agencies the power to regulate climate change without judicial partisanship and legislative gridlock getting in the way. That's 1 and C Green. Warming outweighs. 1 Mitchell says climate change is a genocide, and Crossix proves it absolutely should be prioritized. 1 AC Mitchell. 17. Elimination of life forms take the form of the degree of ocean acidification, dissemination of rainforest by climate change, prevents such a definition, and argue that these events lack intention. 2 probability tipping points and positive feedbacks exist, are coming, and can be predicted. That's Klein 14. As global warming approaches to decrease, there's a risk of non-linear tipping elements where we're on track to 40 is the world market. Heat waves climate food unlocks the ecosystem, and if there is sea level rise, there is an uncertainty that adaptation is possible. What causes the stable upsides to dramatic losses when dynamically surging hurricanes, wildfires, fishery collapses, disruption to water extinctions, and diseases. The analysts think that we are headed for more than 4 degrees, and the 6 degrees will have catastrophic implications like releases of methane from permafrost. Climate change has become an existential crisis. Climatologists are not given the actual guarantees. All of us are convinced that warming poses a danger to civilization. Use sufficiency framing away the risk of a deficit versus the risk of the net benefit, and just take the counterplan if we lose offense. It's a logical extension of Kondo. The first argument was other issues. This perm is genuinely just perming the counterplan. There's no distinct action or issue in the text. I'll answer it later down on the flow where they perm the counterplan, but if they recontextualize it, I definitely get new answers. The double bind is irrelevant. Crossix proves there was no functional impact on solvency. Copyright's functions are within the U.S. Code, and it's treated as an executive agency, so the counterplan can definitely get carried out under the executive branch, but there's no meaningful implication for solvency or the overturning of Chevron, so it shouldn't be relevant. At worst, this is a semantic thing that doesn't have a tangible impact on solvency or how you evaluate the counterplan. The next argument was unconstitutional counterplans. This is irrelevant. This is obviously super arbitrary. It's key to make ground on an app-biased topic, which means you should give us all the ground that we can have, because the topic is centered on is basically us having to deal with it on their terms. It's also arbitrary. There's no right, and I'll concede reasonability from ASPEC, which means you should have a high bar for them extending this, and they can easily find dissets to unconstitutional counterplans if there's such a diversion from the status quo. The next argument, or I'll read a solvency card. Agencies solve best. Congress is too slow, and courts are too small. 21. Agencies are a better position to update policy where legislators can no longer keep the volume of administrative decisions guidance and policies. Courts cannot supervise and manage relevant the power of courts. The next argument was permity both. It fails. It's no different than the plan alone, and links in that benefit. Reviving Chevron requires an ambiguity in existing statutes, which the executive needs to interpret. The perm makes it that there's a clear delegation of authority because the plan has already been passed, which means upholding agency action would not affect broader precedent. Chevron's defining feature is ambiguity. That's Roman 24. Court criticized Chevron. The defining feature is statutory ambiguity. The perm is judicial interpretation, not deference. Greenhill 24. Under Chevron, the court supported a reasonable interpretation of the statute of the underlying statute was ambiguous, including silent and low liver. Over Chevron, the decision dramatically reduces reference and places on course the obligation to determine whether an agency's actions are consistent with the words of the statute. Ambiguity in statutes must be addressed by Congress legislation rather than agency interpretation. The next argument was proved to be the counterclaim. It severs one IP. The IPR protections are statutory and court and agency action is enforcement, which is distinct. That's Christopher 21. Two distinct elements: IPR protection and enforcement. IPR protection relates to the statutes of the country's legislative law. IPR laws codified in evidence writing the legislative books that are subject to the interpretation of judiciary and IPR enforcement agents. IP protections are purely legislative. That's Title 5. Constitution provides Congress power to secure to authors and inventors the exclusive rights to their writings and discoveries and empower Congress to provide the protection out here are the creature of statute. 2 USFG. The before USFG means the entire government. That's Webster's 5. USFG word for now reference agrees the whole. USFG is all 3 branches. Miller 86. Meaning is not mistakenly used as a single entity encompassing government. The government is not the executive or any one branch. Each branch is part of an indivisible whole. 3, 4. I'm not reading that card. Severance is a voting issue. Makes it impossible to predict the 2 and justifies skirting links to all 9 positions. Prefer our interpretation. 1. Predictability. Our evidence of finding a capital T truth about how authority is delegated within IPR. Predictability comes first because it guides research, shaping limits in the ground. 2. Net ground, allowing the app to be a single branch or not codified in law. Skirts links to core generics. Politics goes away, as does any dissent with a perception-based links. Aeronec, because there's no unifying generic on this topic. Group the next arguments about our cars being about the USPTO. Even if so, that it still applies because it's about intellectual property and there's no effect, and that's not necessarily key to Chevron. But the counterclaim spills over. IP laws intertwined with administrative law. Mandiro 21. Intellectual property are also fully incorporating government structure. Practical consequences of IP rights waiving as a result of actions that administrative action can be accounted for. Judge of the general principle of autonomy comes into play. Judges have to respect this principle. The courts of view whether a discretionary powers have been used within the limits of the law, not confined to the realm of IP. Strong relation between intellectual property and competition fall squarely into the scope of administrative law. IP and law strongly intersect. The next argument was overturning Chevron fails framing issue. Anything is better than SQO. Even if it's imperfect, it's better than the status quo because there's no regulation and there's extremely limited regulation, which means that any verse that the counterclaim is better is a reason to vote neg. But the EPA also it doesn't have to be an all pollution to solve, just limit it, which is certainly sufficient. And restoring American climate action spills over. That's Collins in 22. So we have affecting the entire planet and the limited capacity to play climate change. Law did not give authority to set capital emissions, something that was seen as letting use leadership. The largest impacts of accelerating climate change probably Except my core, even see alternative ways of climate action, comes with collective effort. He will be unable to leave court, live in integrity, court, district efforts, keep rights below 2. I'm cutting that card at 2. Go to MGA. Concede the permit is a test of competition. Artificially competitive counterclaims has no bright line and is diff screaming by permitting the counterclaim on executive. Condo and justice are good. We get what we did. 1 flex. Condo is key to allow for the testing the app from multiple angles. Apps have a natural incentive to sandbag your best offensive with the 2EC, exacerbated by a lack of new offense of any offense across huge topic areas that require strategies based on undercoverage. 2 logic. The reason the counterclaim is bad isn't the reason the plan is good. Punishment should fit the crime. Make the counterclaims disparate if we lose theory. The skew is inevitable. T dissets, speed highlighting and pace diminishing. Marginal utility checks, adding more efficacy, peaks in value until it becoming a strategic liability. Dispo fails, it's on Condo. The net can't read mutually exclusive counterclaims in the app dictates the 2 and R. It also doesn't solve their own bets because process counterclaims force terms. Framing. Util is true till. Survival is a prereq to solving their impacts. Absolute planetary death and mass extinction means there's no hope of addressing future violence. Only voting neg ensures we live to fight another day. Probability times magnitude should be your metric for impact calc. It's the most objective and doesn't link to anyone's offense because it prioritizes the very value of life over biases and alternatives and by inevitable trade-offs between ethical stances. The framing issue. Util bad is not offense. Every piece of evidence they've read talks about why util was used badly in the past. That's not the same as how it's used now and does not account for universalized utilitarianism that occurs in debate rounds through debate math. The reason their authors can call these past experiences genocide is through using util to understand the consequences. Predictions are not impossible. They're accurate and based on scholarly analysis, especially in the context of warming, which was the card I read on the impact overview. This is also an assertion that doesn't assume debate. You should evaluate the likelihood of our internal links of our specific scenario over anything else. Eugenics is wrong. Our interpretation is just as equally weighs indigenous concerns to other groups of people. They are eugenics by sacrificing some people by assuming their lives are worth less. Constructive fallacy is wrong because of debate. Probability is not based on some arbitrary notion of low risk impacts. Diverted the debating of internal links in this round. If the impact is so improbable, they should have genuine defense that isn't just rejected on face, which is proven because they're held to the same burden. They have to read app-specific evidence and solvency advocates, which means you should weigh our scholarly articles the same as theirs. Race to extinction impacts for the research stuff lacks a terminal and sufficient preamps and impact defense solves. Our impacts are also well researched and substantiated by scholars, so they should, which proves their valuable points of discussion. Cognitive bias goes neg, there's no available event to anchor our scenarios, so it causes you to not imagine their scope correctly, which is the quiz evidence, but the TC didn't give you a full warrant for this, so it scratched 1 error extrapolation. I'm good for cross. Yeah.
Okay. The solvency argument about how agencies solve best, where do you think this like makes a claim about time frame, especially when the counterpoint is like the executive should do something?
Wait, what do you mean by time frame? It's talking about speed. It says they're better positioned to update policy where legislators can no longer keep pace. It
Okay,
also
sure.
talks about like accelerating
This argument
laws
about
and
how
the complexity.
legislators cannot keep pace, where do you think this assumes things like fiat?
What assumes things like fiat? What do you mean? Like
fiat
this is
means
just
kind
a framing issue. Like fiat means you get durable good faith implementation. It does not mean that like the effectiveness of different branches should be weighed as equal. Like this card is saying that agencies have a fundamental advantage in terms of like their flexibility and ability and capability to adapt to like policy changes and also put in those policies like more quickly.
Okay, I want to talk about this like no spillover argument. What is
Wait,
what do you mean
Oh, like the mandate card?
yeah. What do you mean by like IP and administrative law are like strongly interact?
Yeah, the card says they interact under existing law, which means that it says like that intellectual property rights are not confined to the realm of IP. That proves spillover because it means that doing something in IP relative to the executive means that we'll be able to it will spill over to broader uptake and overturning Chevron.
Yeah, I guess like this card, as I'm reading it, is like courts take into account IP because like why is this not a reason why if they are intertwined now that like just doing the plan is enough to trigger?
No, doing the plan is certainly not enough. The difference between the plan and the counterplan is that the counterplan has the executive take the lead. This card is just meant to be our spillover claim that since IP law and administrative law are connected, then the executive doing something in IP law sets a broader precedent. Since those like
Sure,
areas
I guess like
of law
it says
are
they're intertwined. I don't see the word like precedent.
Yeah, no. It doesn't need to say precedent. That's just our warrant for like why it would spill over and why it would be considered in terms
Sure.
of IP.
Then I guess like why don't past IP policy thumps like the Oracle
Past
case?
IP policy thumped.
Like the Oracle case that had to deal with
clearly it was
copyright
insufficient. When was the Oracle case?
It was like 2021.
Then
something.
that's
Or,
your
like,
problem. Chevron was overturned
The
this summer.
Warhol case, which was like a year ago.
Yeah, Chevron was overturned like 6 months ago.
Yeah, but I guess like,
Recently.
if this is about like, okay, I guess so.
Yeah.
So no ID. So if we have to find an IT policy that occurred after Chevron overturned.
Wait, I'm sorry. Everyone's asking me something. Can you repeat that?
Yeah. So if I like, is the bright line just after Chevron there have been no IP cases?
Not sufficiently, or like not enough to set a broader.
Then I guess
precedent.
where's the spillover bright line?
The spillover bright line? I don't know what you're asking me. Like this
Like
card.
where?
The app would be like a big. I don't know what the word is. Like a big change from the status quo. We think that that's
Why?
probably sufficient to trigger like a broader precedent.
Like I'm like asking why though. Like
I've explained this to you. This is what the Mandara card says. Since they're interconnected.
yeah, but the Mandara
Except
card is not
that's-
about the app.
Yeah, I know. It's about IP law. I don't understand why that's insufficient. You're good.
Okay, is everyone good for the word? Okay. It's gonna be the NGA counterplan, the debt ceiling disadd, the CAFK, and sui generis.
NGA counterplan. Sorry, NGA counterplan.
NGA, debt, cap, sui generis.
I am good.
I just got one.
You good? Okay, sorry. Okay.
Hold on. I
NGA concede the premises to tax accommodation through its original direct argument not the team. That concede no impact and Trump will do it. Inevitably, there's no offense here. Cap concede the premises to tax accommodation theory is original to reject the argument not the team. The sui generis counterplan. QC1 was permanent. The counterplan it severs, which is a voting issue for that ground. A, the counterplan bans IP protection for its TK. That's the opposite of the app. No reclarification. The only perm is due the counterplan, which requires it in entirety. B, sui generis isn't the same as their IPR. Exhibit 24. Those sui generis rights incorporated in the how to make sure copyright patent or trademark principles would not be corrected. They are merely derivative instruments of the standard instruments of IP that we just did. The counterplan creates a legal right to exclusivity that protects investment, but it's not a traditional intellectual property right. Which on the growth hall. 5, legal right to other government copyright through sui generis protection, not authentic intellectual property right. It's unique criteria. Prefer allowing sui generis to ask over the floodgates and tiny after fiat and beyond the scope of limited resolution which kills that ground. The Ginsburg evidence and Kraft evidence are 0. Doesn't mention sui generis once, and the counterplan folds the second factor in the sui generis. It begs the question of the definitions debate. They didn't read the A definition, but there's no implication for it. Do both fails. 1, logic. The CP Vansa plan. Do both is impossible, proving mutual exclusivity. B, solvency, overlapping protections. Exacerbate confusion and ambiguity. Hamilton 85. Presently wise reducing multiple forms of legal protection and combination of all three of the copyright protects inadequate protection of Congress is concerned the sui generis system will have to be devised. Producers will no longer have to take up those protecting the will be spared sorting out. Reflecting for now the counterplan solves the case. It adopts a sui generis regime that which provides a function of the second phase factor to examine the ontological nature of work and potential impact of unauthorized appropriation on this creative environment without using copyright for indigenous communities over traditional knowledge and the database to streamline protection and licensing agreement. It solves every app internal link. The counterplan grants legal protections to TK, which ensures TK won't be subject to fair use. It solves the case term sui generis, avoids all the problems with operating the 2 and C. Compare the counterplan to the SQO, not the app. Net benefit must outweigh solvency deficits with no impact. Now, sui generis protects the same property using a novel method. Plans doctrine overlap results in litigation that nukes solvency. Exhibit 24. Subject matter cannot be further protected by IP regimes. And this is when need for sui generis to prove in the hand tools neither patent or change secret law effectively protecting lists and subject matter institutional knowledge can be protected by combination of standards. IP overlapping rights to get that for IP use to determine the scope of rights sectional overlap into temptation to push even stronger protecting legal. In gaps in the states and regions, contact regional special legal regimes for specific categories. Traditional IP is a poor hit for actually the relegation deficit is wrong. They're about indigenous people in Australia and the Pacific Court there. Empton 19 rights associated with passing privilege of Aboriginal title to extinguish quotes in Tishkwa Latin relied on sui generis associated with Aboriginal title to court in North sui generis of Aboriginal rights sui generis nature Aboriginal rights will continue to be ignored. Fiat solves obviously relevant action will be forced to respect the CP, ignoring it sound a question, otherwise it links back to them. Presumption, there's a homogenization. This extending the deficit in the one area assumes all indigenous groups are the same, which lies in the face of the app. Now, heating deficit, wrong. Just says that indigenous people want protection of their work. The counterplan would solve. Their author agrees. Read 21. Movement towards recognizing indigenous people's right to regulate IP without the adoption of sui generis protection for indigenous knowledge and cultural extraction rather than requiring indigenous people's protection under existing IPR growing. When global consensus around rights indigenous people should have, but there's no impact. No part of the 1EC says hewing exactly to demands is key, and they once again homogenize indigenous demands by saying every indigenous person wants exactly the plan, which is ridiculous and not substantiated in evidence. The text flaw, bogus. The text says we establish a system over the functions of the second factor system. The app says is key. Don't think that they read the card if they did. It links directly back to them. Those sui generis weren't. That's not applicable to that. It is unique. We fiat sui generis, which includes other unique factors other than the second factor, but the app folds it into the sui generis regime perception with it. It's borrowed but distinct. No strike down. Fiat solves with no warrant other than assertion and sui generis frameworks are ideally suited to the protection of traditional knowledge and model of Tudor 13 to protecting indigenous culture for those hoping to make a proper sui generis text rights to fall outside patent trademark copyright protect the subject matter in US sui generis fairly employed developing new protecting private text sui generis cards against pirating that would harm proper sui generis for access and benefit sharing in legal rights and knowledge. TK Costa Rica can adopt sui generis. We post committee on IP drafting international IP law protection and entry for incorporating in IP designing up a bespoke category enable the better fan pride certainty Brewer and Warner 15 patent not suited to traditional knowledge and law should be developed between sui generis prove helpful. Several options include the best method of attack would be a sui generis system. The system would draw down from existing patent laws, HR principles to equal indigenous knowledge for protecting the comprehensive such as system grant tribe jurisdiction over cultural property. Other issues forms illegit. That was a 2 and C, but each term fails. The first one overlaps copyright and sui generis, links to do both answers. The second term is too vague. No one knows what it's fiated over, which kills spillover. Third term makes no sense. You can't quote fair use the ontological nature of the creative environment. That's grammatically nonsense. Sui generis, now, the counterplan sui generis protection spills over, encouraging sustainable blockchain innovation, which shores up every development indicator in solving radiating existential problems from developing companies like climate and war. Dropped, both the terminal and spillover was conceded, so it's only a question of whether blockchain is good for solvency, but the card they read is bogus. It says it's about software protection, not sui generis protection, and our 1NC card is very specific that sui generis is amazing to be tailored to blockchain innovation because it's proven to be great at folding in database rights and doing novel protection for new tech. Blockchain invaders want protection for unauthorized use. Sui generis solves R24. Blockchain is one of the most destructive tech blockchains. Protect IP, protect blockchain. Blockchains increasingly widespread and original creators. Behind innovation have an interest in protecting the works of unauthorized use. Protection through sui generis standalone right divorce from other regimes.
It's framing, chevron, sui generis.
Hold on, I'm downloading. Yes.
Is everyone good?
Yeah.
Cool.
Extinction is not only one side full of probability with high magnitude based on a possible data point which moves decision making correct for normative device towards larger turtling second eugenics calculation for the greatest number. It's sacrificial genocide and endemic balls making this initial system once saying anything is better than the status quo is now warrantless but backed by evidence. They've dropped that works are being stolen in the status quo. You told bad as offense because they prioritize consequences. Debate math was not about predictions are impossible. You're trying to calculate something that can never happen. Warming is wrong. That's going to be on the counterplan, but they're things like international actors other people solve. We do not care until settlers are affected, which is our entire argument. And these people have been feeling the effects for decades. Likelihood of internal links is going to be on the counterplan. Eugenics is right. If you're right, then you should weigh both impacts. The same with solves both of our offense. No link. Our argument is not that the other lives do not matter, but that structural violence is papered over and over again, and then you should prioritize those consequences instead. Now, this chevron deference counterplan. I don't know if I'm being dumb, but I'm pretty sure the 2C drops perm other issues. They dropped that counterplans must compete off text and function, and then they've dropped the functionally legit textually intrinsic perm in the doc that just revitalizes the chevron doctrine. No new answers. This was clear in the 2C, and none of their offense or sui generis applies. Now, perm to both solves. It's perceived as doing the plan twice, and then the judiciary deferring, which solves for the net benefit better. Remember that they also fiat the executive does the plan, so there's no functional difference. The first card is solvency deficit and incoherent. That's wrong. 24 inconsistent in our workable framework. Debated meaningful definition. Now, the next card does not have a reason why the perm is interpretation. Now, perm to the counterplan. It's possible way the plan can be done. Introducing some doubt is enough because competition is a neg burden. Intellectual property protection includes any branch palmetto. 16 transfer people protection include laws, regulation, court decision, world survey, and over 14,000 assessment from 50 sources. Preferred for Afghan. The vast majority of the base centers around increasing enforcement. Only way to gain advantage ground. This also applies to them because they fiat the judiciary. Complies with the interpretation as well. Christopolis uses words like generally and is about international intellectual property. The argument about D is wrong. USMT 3 branches is irrelevant. The result is federal action, so it does not matter if it begins at a different level. They also have to be the prior question. USMT is not all 3 branches. USC is not the government. It's not a single official entity, nor ways referred to U.S. federal government. And it's not official bodies in the name of the government. Now, their term makes all picks out of any agency, official, or branch competitive, which is impossible to defend. Now, go to sui generis. I'm not going to spend much time on that counterplan unless I have time. Now, their text is wrong. It says second factor, which is enshrined in copyright doctrine. Their argument about sequencing does not make sense because the second factor applies to everyone, not just traditional works. This is alone a TKO and proves that the counterplan does not compete. Now, perm to the counterplan is enough. That was done about perm other issues. Also solves. Remember that this solves all of ours and their offense because it solves the net benefit. And the 2C did not go to case. Nothing about the plan is key to solve the net benefit. Remember that the 2C did not actually read their functional load competition block, which means that you should prefer counterplans that are both textually and functionally competitive for Afghan objectivity. Germaneness that was done about. The second perm to do it over the creative environment might be vague, but it's just an assertion. They have no evidence, and the function is not. And they have no reason why that's key for solvency. Now, the plan looks like sui generis because it's a distinct form of law. Identifying the creative environment is functionally case-by-case analysis. 2 frames. 1, the counterplan does not spill over because sui generis will only be interpreted to the area it was designated. That's Ginsburg. Second is competition is not applicable. Double bind. Either magnifies the relegation design because sui generis cannot adopt any traditional copyright mechanism, or it's the same as YAF. Cannot protect the same thing. Send this card out later. Comes to the team when uses indefinite article on spice with court of appeals. Have recognized much. Now, the relegation is that sui generis has distinct as an opportunity for unchecked settler dispossession. 1, rights. All past copyright remedies were extinguished and ignored. Second, ignorance. The court ignored sui generis who spilled over to lower courts. As Empson cannot solve YAF, and these people cannot seek remedies or have their claims litigated in the same way, which disproves counterplay competition and links in net benefit. Now, competition, etc. Canada, Australia is relevant. Prefer empirical evidence about courts litigate sui generis in the context of native works. Doctrinal overlap is wrong. The counterplay does not abolish copyright, nor do all indigenous works because traditional knowledge. Some are new, and non-indigenous people also exist. Homogenization is wrong. It's about the legal systems being the same, not indigenous people. Read is wrong. Does not define what type of sui generis protection, and all of the examples are currently able to be done. Thus, Fuentes tax law is wrong. You need to identify what makes the counterplan unique. This is the same as saying the counterplan does something and it doesn't compete. Their evidence is speculative and not applicable to indigenous cultural works. Empson said that this was done in opposition to constitutional mandates, which disproves good faith. There's no net benefit. Our card is not about software, but about issues that encompass blockchain. Rondo says that it's inflexible, ad hoc, and overproductive and violates good protection schemes. Their card's about big data, and they have no card saying that protection over traditional knowledge would then spill over to a sui generis over a blockchain regime, means they cannot solve all of this offense as well. Go back to the other counterplan. I have time. There's a big link to the process that outweighs. Agencies increase climate and hurt environmental laws. They have no cards about this and misinterpreted the CWA and appointed right-wing politicians to defer to fossil fuel interests. This was dropped. It causes more warming, which is an internal link turn to their net benefit. That Siegel and Burke. Why didn't see evidence is insufficient? It does not talk about administration, just other branches of the government that are far right, which applies equally to the counterplan. No solves better. Durable fiat means plan happens, and is the top of the docket. There are multiple steps of the counterplan also even it out. Counterplan also gets struck down. That's Parazanki. Counterplan is legislative, which makes the counterplan illegitimate and unconstitutional. This is logical. You would roll your eyes if someone read a counterplan that your mom should shrink and copyright and then fiat through it. Otherwise, unconstitutional fiat spikes out of all agent key warrants, subtracts from the core research on topic or often deletes on process or counterplan key warrants. This also applies to sui generis, reason to reject the team. They say just find an answer, but that legal process does not exist, so no one would write about it. At least it should be a frame for uncertainty for the counterplan that makes the process illegit, so some people will not use copyright. Go back to the advantage, forgot to extend it. Only enforcing the second factor solves for appropriation. They never contested it because it makes sure that the courts always use it in their decision analysis, which stops unauthorized appropriation in the status quo.
253 starting.
Oh wait, we need to send out a card real quick. Sorry. On speech end.
Oh, yeah.
It was the Thomas 15 card from the Tracy.
Oh, God. Okay. Yeah, yeah. I think it's. It's the executive counterplan, then sui generis. Sounds good. Every part of the impact calculus from the 2NC on warming. They've dropped it's more probable than anything else, and every turns case warrant. The 1AC Mitchell evidence is that climate change is a genocide against indigenous lives that should certainly be prioritized. 1AC Crosslix could not give you an explanation why the framing of warming or trying to address it in the first place is intrinsically violent. All their stuff about Utah being bad definitely does not apply to this, because one of their authors explicitly says that they agree it's a a risk that should be prioritized since it's actively harming indigenous bodies. The 2NC also did not spend a lot of time on the extinction part of the debate. We just said that it would be bad because it would force people off their land. It would cause things like crop shortages and water failures and worsen people's quality of life. It would also cause mass death, but that is not the only reason we are saying it is important to prioritize, which means they cannot go over this critique of utilitarianism since that is not our only justification. It is ethically irresponsible to disregard warming since their authors agree it's a risk that also answer any of the predictions and possible stuff that they'll try to cross-fly from framing. They've dropped the Klein evidence, which is that tipping points are inherently predictable, and even if we can't predict the exact time when they'll come, it's scientific consensus that warming is an increasing threat and will continue to affect us. We're also approaching tipping points, and we can't predict exactly when they will be, but that's why fast mitigation is necessary. Even if we don't get to the end point of warming, this card definitely substantiates that there is an impact to it, and that we should prioritize it because it hurts indigenous bodies and could definitely be predicted to an extent that's sufficient for you to be confident in our scenario. Now, the actual counterplan. The first argument was other issues. No, this prim is exactly the same as prim to both. Go back and look at it if you're confused, but it literally just puts in the plain text that the judiciary should endorse that interpretation. That is the same as prim to both because it does the plan and sets a clear and it clearly delegates authority by passing the plan, and which means that even if the judiciary endorses that interpretation, there is no agency action that looks like deferral or revitalize Chevron broadly. That also means the prim to both does not solve. The Rodman card says that ambiguity is Chevron's defining feature, which means there has to be an ambiguity in existing law, i.e. the plan cannot have been passed for Chevron to be actually overturned, since that's what makes the executive branch look independent and causes other branches to defer. The rehighlight of the Rodman evidence does not make sense. This is explaining the court's rationale for overturning Chevron. This does not mean that Chevron is inherently worse. They also have not explained an impact to this deficit or why it implicates any of the solvency stuff, so they definitely don't get to do that extrapolation in the 2AR because I can't respond to it now, but it certainly substantiates our claim about perm to vote because it says a thing about ambiguity, which is what we need to win that the perm doesn't solve or meaningfully revive Chevron. Perm to the counterplan. Or I'll come back to perm to the counterplan later. The argument about strike down does not make sense. Earlier on the flow, Gautam said durable fiat, which means we should get to fiat through the same thing. We get durable good faith implementation, which means the counterplan cannot be struck down. We have read evidence that about executive deferral, which means even if the app goes through the Copyright Office, if the executive doing it uniquely sets a precedent that it allows us to revitalize Chevron because it signals they're going outside of their authority and signals that the legislative branch is deferring to their authority. The unconstitutional stuff is totally irrelevant. You should filter it through competition because they've conceded every reason that the topic is neg bias. They've also conceded reasonability. It has not proven that the debate is fundamentally impossible, which is their burden for proving this. But if the counterplan is competitive, then it should be considered. Since the topic is neg bias, go back to the other issues. Perm. It was destroyed in go to perm to the counterplan. Sorry. Do the counterplan severs, which is a voting issue for neg ground. Absence only via legislative action. Court and agency action is IP enforcement, not protection. It means none of the parts of the counterplan are possible access. Christopolo, the app's problem is that they don't have a counter-interpret. Prefer it for predictability. Drop their evidence is a capital T truth on how authority and IP is delegated. Teilberg has huge intent to define and exclude. Says IP are a creature of statute. Predictability outweighs. It preconfigures how we approach the topic and outweighs debatability because marginal differences in debatability can always be found. Palmito is about how to measure IPR, not how it's enforced. Rights and court decisions may be tangential to IP, but IP rights protections are only legislative. It also limits explosion that allows protection over news stories. Evan will send that re-highlighting, but I'm inserting it in yellow. USFG being with 3 branches or not is irrelevant because the counterplan only fiats 2 branches, and even if it could be any branch, other words in the resolution constrain how it's enforced in the first place. The Picks warrant is wrong. Judge bias against Picks would form over the course of the season and apps would have great Congress key warrants. Silly Picks like have my mom do IPR have no solvency. App is also wrong. Dropped from Condo that the topic is massive and allowing apps to be courts or agencies is brutal for the night. Greenlighting tons of tiny agency apps which destroy neg ground. The other issues perm was also destroyed in cross-text. It's not other issues, it's just perm to the counterplan because it is the counterplan text. Gautam dropped this, so perm to the counterplan answers apply along with perm to joke. Not going to framing because obviously we answered it. Sui generis cannot be classified to this counterplan.
I'll send the repilot.
just the counterplan.
Yeah.
Okay, there are two easy ways to vote F in this debate. First is a permutation. Did we see said perm other issues? And they answered the perm that was inserted in the doc, but then I did not go for it. I did not actually read that perm. I said the words perm other issues, and Gautam sent out the permutation text in the document that said perm quarters. Now, it says plan. The USFG should revitalize Chevron deference, and then Gautam sent out two more texts that make the executive do something, and then the judiciary defer to that interpretation over the environment. Hold the line. The tuner responds to the wrong permutation on the ontological nature of the work. That is not the first perm in the 2EC, but instead the one in the middle of the document. They've dropped that counterplans must compete off of text and function for ground objectivity and research, which means that this perm is totally legitimate and solves net benefit. It literally revitalizes Chevron deference, and then the ones Gautam sent out make it so deference happens over something else. Now, they don't have a reason why intrinsicness is bad. This text that we've sent out in the document was textually intrinsic but functionally competitive, which makes it net benefit. The tuner does not have a reason why this is not wrong, and the permutation literally revitalizes Chevron, which solves all of their offense. The perms that Gautam then sent out in the perm doc literally say that the CAF should do it over the environment, and they do not have deficits to that. Now, second is perm do both. Remember that they have said it's irrelevant if the USFG is not 3 branches, which means a logical implementation of the plan is not the courts, but also the executive. That swamps deficits because it's perceived to be the exec doing the plan twice, and the judiciary holding to that interpretation. Hold the line. Nothing they said was contextual. The ambiguity warrant is not contextualized to any of these permutations. Obviously, the text may be vague, but the counterplan function is not vague. This was conceded off the sui generis counterplan and the one error, which makes this all bankrupt. Now, second is that there's a huge risk that the counterplan worsens warming. The tuner really had maybe one sentence of explanation about how the counterplan solves warming. They had a lot of stuff and a lot of really good stuff about how warming is really bad. And there are two framing questions. First is that they have dropped the case, so uniqueness flips F. It literally cannot get worse for indigenous people, and conceding solvency of the 1AC throughout this debate means that we at least solve for the proximate causes of violence. Second is that there's a link turn to the process that outweighs. Agencies interpret increased climate and current environmental laws. They misinterpreted the CAWA and appointed right-wing politicians to defer to fossil fuel industry. That causes warming. That's a Siegel and Burke evidence that we extended in the 2EC and the 1 error. The 2EC marked it probably at the last 2 words of highlighting, which is enough for the warrants. It also, the first paragraph of this other article also makes a difference that says that courts are good for warming, which answers all their stuff at the top about impact training, about how the status quo cannot literally get worse because the court literally says that the courts are better for warming than agencies that defer to right-wing fossil fuel interests. Now, the counterplan, I literally do not know what to do here because they've dropped that the counterplan is worse for warming. We can concede everything about how warming is really bad and turns indigenous violence, but this is all the reason that, the tuner,
the first perm in the 2EC is what they answered. The
first
2EC had
perm in the 2EC
another perm in the middle of it that said the USFG should revitalize Chevron deference, and then the plan before that. 2NR drops that perm. 2NR drops 2 more perms that I sent out that have the executive do something over other issues, then the judiciary adhering to that interpretation, which also solves Chevron deference, and then they conceded the USFG is not 3 branches, which means the plan can be the executive, and it does the executive twice, and
yeah, sure. Yeah, again, as I said already, we said perm other issues at the top of this counterplan. We did not read the one about ontological nature, which was the cross-sex of this perm that I didn't read. I said perm other issues. In the text of the document, the perm other issues also had a written text that said perm to the app and overturn the Chevron doctrine, which they have not made a textual reason why this is not legitimate. Then Gautam sent out in a perm doc. The doc is literally called a quarters perms. It has a current part. It has a permutation about the executive counterplan that does the plan over the environment, or does the plan and does the counterplan over the environmental issues, which solves the net benefit. They have not read deficit to these counterplan. I'm really sorry that it came down to this way, but they've answered the wrong permutation, and they've also conceded a link turn to the impact about how the process is worse. I don't.